Hey guys, I'm Angelo. Welcome back to Crypto Coin Consultants. Today I'll be telling you everything you need to know about a hard fork. But before we get started, answer me this. Which of the following hard forks failed? Bitcoin Classic, Super Bitcoin, Bitcoin Gold, or Bitcoin Diamond? Let us know what you think in the comment section below and stay tuned to find out the right answer. Number 6. What is a fork? If you watched my video on blockchains, you'll know that a blockchain is a list of digital transactions, information, or data that are grouped together in blocks, then added to a row of past blocks to form a chain. A fork is a divergence in a blockchain's path, or in other words, when a blockchain splits into two different paths moving forward, just like a fork in the road. A blockchain that forks implies that it's a permanent divergence into two different chains, and miners can choose which chain they want to direct their computing power towards. This means that both chains will contain the exact same history right up until the very point at which they diverged. From there on out, two separate networks will begin to exist. Forks happen when a group of miners choose to follow a new set of rules and protocol that differ from the already existing set of rules. Bitcoin Cash, for example, was a hard fork of Bitcoin because it increased block sizes to 8 megabytes per block. Bitcoin remains at 1 megabyte per block. There are two types of forks, hard forks and soft forks, and it's important to know the difference between the two. Number 5. Soft forks. A soft fork is when a change in the software protocol has been made in which previously valid blocks are made invalid. It's considered backwards compatible, since old nodes or computers mining within the Bitcoin network are able to consider new transactions to be valid. Soft forks require a majority of miners to upgrade their software in order to enforce the new rules, whereas hard forks require every single miner to upgrade their software. The benefit of a soft fork is that it allows new transaction types to be added to the blockchain that only the transaction's participants are required to understand. The participants being the sender, the receiver, and the miners. This is how pay-to-script hash functionality, or P2SH, was made valid on the Bitcoin blockchain. Number 4. Hard forks. Hard forks, on the other hand, are extreme changes to the protocol that requires all nodes to upgrade their software, rather than just the majority. Unlike soft forks, hard forks are not backwards compatible. Therefore, nodes following the old set of rules are not able to consider new transactions to be valid. The changes in the rules are that extreme, since there are two clearly distinct sets of rules governing the system that a miner must choose from. One path follows the old protocol, while the forked path follows a new upgraded protocol. An example of this is the DAO hard fork, which gave birth to Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. The DAO, or Decentralized Autonomous Organization, was a digital group whose infrastructure was built on the Ethereum blockchain. The group was hacked in June of 2016, and their funds were stolen. In order to restore the funds, Ethereum Classic was created, which was built on the principle that the blockchain cannot and should not be changed. Ethereum Classic continues to run on this original unforked path, and Ethereum as we know it today is using the newer, upgraded rules in their protocol. Although the term hard fork may sound a little scary or intimidating at first, don't worry. Most people are unaware that forks are more or less simply protocol upgrades, and 99% of the time the chain doesn't even split. Number 3. Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash. One of the most well-known hard forks occurred on the Bitcoin blockchain on August 1st, 2017, when Bitcoin Cash was created. For every Bitcoin you held, you were given an equal amount of Bitcoin Cash at the time of the fork. The fork occurred due to what's known as the Bitcoin scalability problem, meaning the maximum number of transactions the Bitcoin network was able to process was extremely limited. To put things into perspective, Visa is able to process a whopping 47,000 transactions per second. Bitcoin is only able to do 7 transactions per second max. This created a bottleneck within the Bitcoin network as transaction times were getting very delayed and mining fees to get your transaction processed were getting extremely high. As a result, the Bitcoin Cash hard fork took place, which increased block sizes from 1 megabyte to 8 megabytes in order to increase the number of transactions the Bitcoin Cash ledger can process. block 478558 was the last common block between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. Since then, miners have been able to switch their hash power back and forth between the two chains based on what they determined to be the most profitable at the time. Number 2. SegWit. Just over 3 weeks after the Bitcoin Cash hard fork, a soft fork on the Bitcoin blockchain occurred on August 24th, 2017 that activated SegWit, short for Segregated Witness. This event increased the block size limit on the Bitcoin blockchain by removing certain parts of a transaction's information, thus freeing up more space on each block and allowing more transactions to occur on every block. But SegWit isn't limited to just Bitcoin. It's also been implemented on other popular coins such as Litecoin, Vertcoin, and Digibyte, to name a few. As you can see, the Bitcoin Cash hard fork along with the Bitcoin SegWit soft fork were both attempts at improving Bitcoin's scalability issue. Number 1. EtherZero. Bitcoin has had several other hard forks outside of Bitcoin Cash, while Ethereum, on the other hand, has had very few. But one such important upcoming hard fork on the Ethereum blockchain is EtherZero, which some say is going to be the most successful hard fork in Ethereum's entire history. It's set to take place on January 19th, 2018 at block number 4,936,270. Before I continue discussing EtherZero, it's important for you to know about masternodes. Masternodes are servers set up to facilitate the operations of a specific currency, like sending or receiving coins. But in order to set up the server, you're required to own a set number of coins, lock it up in a wallet, have an IP address dedicated solely to the server, and run the server for 24 hours a day with no more than 1 hour in downtime. The Dash cryptocurrency, for example, requires you to own 1,000 Dash as collateral before you set up your server to run as a masternode. Like mining, masternodes get paid from block rewards in the form of the respective coin at higher than normal yields. These block rewards come from the transaction fees people pay when sending their coins to another wallet. Going back to our Dash example, masternodes collect 45% of the block rewards, which ends up yielding every masternode roughly 11% per year. The difference between Ethereum and EtherZero is that EtherZero plans on implementing this masternode system in order to improve and stabilize its own market value. They're aiming for EtherZero's market value to be 10% of Ethereum's, or roughly $70. The team, comprised primarily of Dapp developers or decentralized application developers, hopes that masternodes will be of more benefit to cash users. They're setting the initial masternode collateral point at 10,000 EtherZero. 45% of the block rewards will go to the masternodes, 45% to miners, and 10% to self-governing communities responsible for proposing changes that will improve the coin's operations and functionality. So which of these hard forks failed? If you guessed Bitcoin Classic, you're right. The Bitcoin Classic hard fork proposed an increase in block sizes from 1 megabyte per block to 2 megabytes per block in a separate attempt at solving Bitcoin's scalability issue. Doing so would double the number of transactions per second that could be processed. But the number of nodes using the upgraded Bitcoin Classic software never hit a critical point, and the project was abandoned on November 10th, 2017. Upon ceasing their operations, Bitcoin Classic declared that the only hope for solving Bitcoin's scalability problem was Bitcoin Cash. All the principles I've outlined in this video can be applied to the cryptocurrency market as well, the first of which is Bitcoin. And just like other assets traded on futures markets, there's no real intent to actually send or transfer ownership of a Bitcoin from one person to another.